Hello folks, welcome to Our City Matters. Today we have Bonnie Wright with us, who's going to be speaking to us about New Hampshire Right to Know GMO. She is the founder of this organization in New Hampshire, and we owe her all the credit for some legislation and for advocating for our healthy foods in New Hampshire that are labeled non-GMO. So welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate that, and I can't wait to hear all the information you have for us today, because I went to your website and there was a lot there. And
Yep.
if you can help break that down for us, and oh my goodness.
Well, New Hampshire Right to Know GMO has been in existence for about 3 years. We found out that we had a labeling bill here in New Hampshire and no grassroots to support it. So naively, I said, let's start a group, and had no idea what I was doing and how to do it. No idea what I was getting into. Had I known then what I know now, I'm not sure I could have done it, but learned as I went, and we're building up. We now have over 2,100 followers on Facebook, and we just keep going and going.
Okay, the address on Facebook is?
Just NH Right to Know GMO.
Okay, great. So more people can subscribe, or what is it?
Like us. We hope you like us.
New Hampshire Right to Know GMO.
And we try and keep people apprised of what's going nationally, internationally, locally, some of the other states, what we're doing, some of the scientific information. So we try and keep a big bit of information. We research many articles and share the best of the best.
Yes, I've seen some come across, and basically the argument is against Monsanto.
Well,
the manufacturer, or the one that's putting together this genetic modification of our foods.
I like to use the term genetic engineering.
Okay.
One of the arguments we get from the biotech industry is that all foods are genetically modified. They've been modified for years, and they have to a degree, because you take and you cross-pollinate and selective breeding, and you control how things evolve over years.
I think that's different.
That's very different from what we're talking about. What we're talking about is scientists going in and changing the DNA in a species, frequently by taking a DNA from one species and forcibly inserting it into another, something that could never happen in nature.
Right.
And more recently, they are now taking DNA and turning off traits so that something such as a potato won't, or an apple won't brown. So it's turning off a protective mechanism in the gene. The problem is we're not doing any long-term studies, so we really don't know what's going to happen with these foods that we're eating. It's been introduced into our diet about 20 years ago, and about 80, possibly more, 80% of our processed foods contain genetically engineered ingredients.
Oh my goodness. Now, just to get off on a topic here about allergies, some people, if you're doing something with a food that is maybe not agreeing with somebody, and they don't know that they're ingesting a genetically engineered food, then they go to the doctor and they say, you know, oh, what am I allergic to? And there can be a lot of complications there. A
lot of complications, and there are a lot of people who are associating their allergies with what they're eating. And I know a number of people who have had severe corn allergies and have stopped eating corn for a while, getting it out of their systems, and then they reintroduce organic corn, which is not genetically engineered. They have no problem. They eat the genetically engineered corn, and they get sick. So I can't point you to a scientific study that can, conclusively say this is the problem, but I do know people that are experiencing this. So.
Right. So the way to get around this bad food for themselves is to eat organic, labeled organic.
Yeah.
So that you're not getting these genetically engineered foods in your diet, and the risks of having, metabolic issues.
Right.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
So we recommend that folks eat organic. The other option is there are foods that are labeled non-GMO project verified. This is a certification project where the food manufacturers can take their food and submit it to this company who will run it through each ingredient through a multi-step process to ensure that every ingredient in the way, they follow the paper trail to make sure that everything is not genetically engineered. And if you look for the little blue butterfly on the packages, those products have been, they don't contain genetically engineered ingredients. The problem with that is a minor problem, but for some people it is a problem in that it means that they don't have genetically engineered. It doesn't mean they don't have the chemicals that some of the organic foods do not. So that's something to bear in mind when you're choosing that. But
so it could still be a food that the farmer used Roundup in the field or something.
They're not likely to use Roundup in the field except on certain crops such as wheat. When they grow wheat, they don't use the Roundup during the growing process, but at the very end, they apply Roundup to the wheat to dry it out. It's called a desiccant. So they do that on wheat, coffee, a few other products.
And you can't rinse off the wheat.
You cannot.
So you're eating Roundup.
Yep.
When you're eating that wheat. So unless you're eating organic wheat.
So let's talk about Roundup for a second. Roundup is a chemical that is made by Monsanto, and we talked about Monsanto, and I do want to say there are other companies that are equally as bad on my list. Dow, Syngenta, Bayer, all also make genetically engineered foods. And it will go back a step further, and hopefully I can bring myself back to where we are. Genetically engineered foods, the majority of them are created in a lab by companies like Monsanto to be resistant to heavy applications of chemicals, generally glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is manufactured by the same people who are making the seeds. So they make the seeds so that they can apply heavy doses of this herbicide, kills the weeds but not the plant. Plants can absorb it into their root systems, so we can be getting it. Roundup, the most common, or glyphosate, the most common chemical, is starting to fail. And by that I mean that the crops are becoming resistant to it, so they're needing to use more and more applications of it. And they are also creating super weeds, which are resistant to the chemical.
Oh my goodness.
So, so what they've done recently is they've introduced a new chemical. It's called 2,4-D, which is one of the major ingredients, one of two major ingredients in Agent Orange, which, if you remember, was what they used to defoliate the leaves in the jungles in Vietnam and have all kinds of problems in Vietnam.
Goodness.
2,4-D was recently studied by the International IARC, International, I forget the terminology, but it's the cancer research, it's a CR, which is part of the World Health Organization. So IARC studied 2,4-D and said it may be a human carcinogen. The month before that, they looked at glyphosate. And glyphosate is a step higher. It is a probable human carcinogen. They're finding glyphosate in mother's milk, in people's urine. In certain parts of the country, they're finding glyphosate in every air sample, every water sample that they're taking. So it's becoming a little bit of a concern. Many countries, 64 countries require labeling of genetically engineered foods. And a number of these countries are in the process of looking at banning the use of glyphosate in their countries. So,
well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it would be good. It would be great if our country would do that. We are, of the the major industrialized countries in the world, United States and Canada, are the only two that don't require labeling.
Amazing.
Which is bizarre if you think about it. They just did a poll. Americans want labeling. I mean, every single poll they do is consistently shown we want to have our foods labeled. A group called Just Label It hired a group called the Melman Group to do, and they're a big national independent company, to do a poll, and they asked people, do you favor labeling? 93% of Democrats said they do, 86% of independents, and 86% of Republicans all said, I'm in favor of labeling. They asked, how important is it that food be labeled? 90% of Democrats and 85% independents and Republicans said it's important. 88% is very important. So why are we not labeling here? The American public wants it. We're having problems with some of our politicians understanding that this is what the American public want.
So Monsanto must have their lobbyists.
They do.
So they block legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that Vermont passed legislation for labeling GMO in their entire state.
Yep.
But then the Grocers Association and Monsanto's lobbyists are now putting another bill in to undo the one that they have. Is that true in the U.S. legislature?
Yes. Let's talk about
Yeah,
Vermont. Vermont passed their law. Mm-hmm. It goes into effect July 1st, 2016. However, the grocery manufacturers and several other groups decided that this wasn't a good idea in their best interest, so they sued the state of Vermont. And the state of Vermont asked the judge to dismiss it, and the judge would not. That was disappointing. However, the grocery manufacturers asked for a stay of execution. I'm not sure that's the right term, but close enough. They wanted to take that July 1st date and move it forward. And the judge ruled, no, we're going to stick with the July 1st date. They said, let's stop this whole process because it is in violation of interstate commerce laws. And the judge said, no, you want to go to trial, we can talk about that, but no, we're gonna keep going. So most of what the judge said looks very favorable for Vermont. I have not heard of a trial date, and I think I would have heard. There is no date set yet for that. And we do know that the grocery manufacturers are on a timeline. They have to have all of that food in the stores replaced by July 1st.
In Vermont.
In Vermont. So
2016.
Yeah. So this fall they got to start labeling on their products and shipping the products out.
Wow.
So time is ticking. And Monsanto and the biotech industry and those folks are not very happy with this, and they are doing everything they can to find ways to stop it. And one of the ways is a bill that was introduced in Congress by a gentleman from Kansas, Mike Pompeo, representative, and it's called the Safe and Accurate Food Act. And it's ironic. It's nothing safe about it. There's nothing accurate about it. It does not belong there. We call it the DARK Act.
Okay.
D-A-R-K, Deny Americans the Right to Know.
Okay.
And what it's going to do, first off, is preempt the state laws. So the states like Vermont, also Connecticut and Maine have their own laws, but it will keep them from being able to put their bills into effect.
Amazing.
And make it illegal for any state to have their own state law. As I understand it, that is in violation of I don't hear much talk about it, but as I understand it.
10th Amendment?
10th Amendment.
Yeah. Really.
In addition to making it illegal for states to have their own law, it will also make it difficult for the FDA to have a law. It's calling for a voluntary labeling law. We've had the grocery manufacturers have had the right to say, we have GMOs in our food. They've been allowed to do that since 2001. There is not one food that has been labeled that since this has happened. I talked a little while ago about the non-GMO project verification. They can take and have it tested, and if they do, they have to pay sometimes upwards of $10,000. Depends on how many ingredients. But they take all of those ingredients and test each one. It can be and that's for one flavor. So if a company has multiple flavors, each flavor has to be tested separately. Can become very, very expensive. So these are the people who are growing things using ingredients the way nature intended. The grocery manufacturers, they have product that is tested, made in a lab, could never, I mean, you're taking a fish and merging it with a tomato. It's not going to happen in nature ever. So why shouldn't they, if they're going to make something new, have it patented because it's unique enough, but then they turn around and say it's substantially equivalent to the original, so why should we have to label? So we really feel that they should be labeling. We can't tell if people are getting sick if it's from what they're eating, because there's no way for the doctors to know. What are you eating? I mean, we can read the ingredients and, you know, study all of the sub-ingredients. Like if you read cornstarch, do you know if it's genetically engineered or not? I know it probably is. If you read modified starch, my husband would look at that. He comes home with, look at what I found, and isn't this exciting? I say, but honey, you know, look at the ingredient list. Well, it says natural, and it says it's healthy. I said, but you got to read the ingredients. And he just doesn't know what to look for.
So we have a list.
We have a list
of genetically engineered foods that perhaps people don't know that exist.
Well, the big two are the corn and the soy. And high fructose corn syrup is in almost everything. Soy lecithin is in lots of things, baby formula.
Right.
Then we have canola, which comes from a product called rapeseed, but it's canola oil. Cotton. And people say, well, you know, okay, so what about cotton? You know, sure, it's organic cotton or regular cotton. Does it really matter? It's not just about the cotton that we wear, it's the cotton we eat. Because when you eat vegetable oil, it's cottonseed oil or canola oil.
Or soy oil. And
it can be a combination, but it's frequently used in the cotton is frequently used in the vegetable oil. Sugar beets is way up there.
And people say, well, I never eat sugar beets. Oh, yes, you do.
Yep.
Every time you eat sugar in an item that doesn't say cane sugar, you're eating beet sugar.
Yep, exactly. Then there's a couple more that, and all of those that we just discussed, they're grown for two reasons. Adapting to the Roundup or the 2,4-D, or the other one, common trait is each cell in the plant creates its own pesticide, which kills the bugs. They say it doesn't hurt people, but every single cell is making this pesticide. We don't know what's happening. We know they say it doesn't hurt human cells, but inside our digestive system are our microbes, microbiomes,
right.
which is learning about. It's a fairly new science. We don't know if it's killing the bugs that are eating the plants. What's it doing to these good bugs that we need in our digestive system to keep us healthy?
Right.
We don't know yet. There's too much that we don't know. We need long-term studies. Because these seeds are patented, we can't do long-term studies. So they don't have access. They can't take, you know, corn ABC that's modified and corn ABC that's not and compare them, because they don't the companies who control the seeds will not allow it.
Wow. I was in the grocery store the other day, and I saw a big sign in Market Basket, and it said choices. And it said organic, said gluten-free, said non-GMO or non-GE or GE verified, certified, whatever the certification is. And I said, wow, that's interesting that, you know, they're advertising this other line of food, that we have choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I think people need to take the choice and say, okay, if there's this food and this food, you know what, I'm going to take the organic. I'm going to spend a few dollars more, and I'm going to boycott, basically, the GMO food,
Mm-hmm.
the GMO sugar, and choose the one that says cane sugar. Although you said cane is supposedly the next one on the list to go GM, you know, genetically engineered.
They're working at it.
Oh, and then we have Hawaiian papaya.
The Hawaiian papaya, most of that has a disease, and the genetically engineered technique has kept the Hawaiian papaya alive and going. I don't know a great deal about that. I do know about the orange blight on the orange crops. They have a disease that's affecting a lot of the oranges in Florida. And they're saying, oh, we got to come in and we got to take care of this problem by genetically engineering the oranges. But I have done some research on that, and I have come up, and it's on our website, there are 4 ways that they can fix this problem without resorting to genetically engineering. One of them is just applying heat to the oranges. One of them is a wasp that goes in and kills the parasite that is involved in this. So there are ways that this can be done without resorting to genetically engineering. It's not going to save the world. It's been proven over and over.
And then zucchini.
Zucchini and summer squash also have a disease. It's only being done on a small quantity of these products, but you go in and you buy summer squash or zucchini, you don't know if that's come from one of those areas where they're combating that disease.
Amazing. And alfalfa, with more coming.
Alfalfa is given to all of our animals.
That's right.
And we use alfalfa.
That's a whole other show in talking about the effects on the animals. I've heard horror stories about the genetically engineered feed that's causing all kinds of things with the animals. So, but I did want to go through, in the next couple minutes here, the Vermont, Connecticut, and Maine. Okay, we have Vermont that passed their GMO restriction in their state,
Yep.
and Maine also with a caveat.
Maine and Connecticut both have caveats. Connecticut was the first state to pass a labeling law, but they were a little bit nervous, you know, saying, okay, you know, grocery manufacturers threatening to sue the first state. What can we do? And they came up with several, we call them trigger clauses. Their bill won't go into effect until certain conditions or triggers are met. They have to have a state that borders Connecticut, which would be Massachusetts, Rhode Island, or New York. They have to have 5 states in the Northeast, which is all of New England, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And they have to have a population of 20 million people affected by a labeling bill in the Northeast. So they have those conditions that have to be met. Maine passed their bill a week after Connecticut, and they also put in a trigger clause, and they didn't go quite as extreme as Connecticut, but they just said 5 contiguous states. So you look at a map, and there's Maine, and there's New Hampshire, and there is no other state contiguous to Maine other than New Hampshire.
So we need to do it.
Maine can't have their law go into effect until we do ours.
So besides the Dark Act, we need to call our representatives.
The Dark Act.
It didn't pass yet, has it?
The Dark Act passed in the U.S. House.
Okay.
And it has not yet been introduced in the Senate, which is a good thing. And
So we should call our senators?
we should absolutely be calling our senators. Now, Jean Shaheen is a co-sponsor of another bill it's called the Genetically Engineered Food Right to Know Act, which is S511. So that tells me that she is going to be opposing the Dark Act.
Okay.
Just like Annie Custer supported H.R. 913. She voted against the bill. But we need to be contacting New Hampshire senators to tell them we want a mandatory labeling bill, not voluntary.
Okay, we're wrapping up. But you can let us know, we have your Facebook page, which is...
NHRightToKnowGMO.org.
Okay, and then we have that's your website.
Yeah.
And the Facebook is...
Just NH Right to Know GMO.
Okay, great. There's so much information, folks. I mean, if you go to those pages, you'll learn a lot more here. And
if you have questions, find me on Facebook or just send me an email, info@NHRightToKnowGMO.org.
okay,
Happy to provide anything.
That's great. Well, maybe we can have you on again when something happens with legislation, and maybe we can raise the flag and say, yay!
Got to stop the Dark Act.
Okay.
Got to go.
All right, call your senators, and we appreciate you listening in on Our City Matters. Thank you, Bonnie, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Take care, folks. Next time.